Um, so we were talking about the challenges of being the person who's trying to work through and work with a high conflict co-parent, and how to make that work. And you were going through your BIF method to sort of calm the sender of the message, but also potentially learn to calm and train the high conflict person in how to respond more appropriately to those communications. So I want to pick up with the next set of questions, because I know people fired in a lot of questions and they want to get their answers if possible. So we'll just move on. So some people who are in our audience tonight might have heard the phrase parallel parenting as an alternative to cooperative co-parenting. And I wonder if you can speak to whether, if you're in a relationship or you've broken up with a high conflict person that you need to co-parent with, whether you ought to just jump right to the parallel parenting track.
I think it's worth seeing if you can have a more cooperative relationship. But if things are really just not going, you can't agree on things, things are being undermined, then parallel parenting can really be a good high conflict solution. And I've had many cases where peace came to each part of the family once they stopped trying to constantly communicate or constantly agree on things. So I think it's worth trying to see how cooperative can you be, and then more and more move in that direction. And I don't know if people know what to picture with parallel parenting, but I'll tell you what my picture is. It's when each parent just focuses on the kids when they're with them. And it doesn't matter how much time, doesn't mean 50-50, it could be 80-20 or 90-10, but that there's not a lot of communication between the parents, and that when the kids are in one parent's house, that they're not talking to the other parent. Because that's one of the things high conflict people like to do, is sabotage the other parent's parenting time by saying, you know, I have to have phone calls at bedtime, or I need to be able to ask questions of my child about their new step parent, things like that. And that can really undermine things. So it's really, you know, a kind of a imaginary wall that keeps the parents from dealing with each other and really protects the children from the conflict as well.
Thank you for explaining that difference and giving us a visual picture of how that plays out, because I think sometimes people get those two distinctions, parallel versus co-parenting, mixed up. So that being said, I get a lot of questions from clients who say, at the exchange, the other parent, you know, went into some tirade and called me bad names and lost their cool and, you know, disrespected or made horrible comments about my new, you know, significant other. And the kids were right there in the midst of it. So how do I address that, Debra? How do I address it with the kids? And how do I address it, if at all, with the person who just, you know, mishandled that completely?
Yeah, I think it doesn't hurt to say, you know, Joe, that's inappropriate. Let's save that for when the kids aren't around. And just, you know, I think just labeling something as inappropriate helps the kids know at least one person thinks this isn't appropriate. But another thing to do in general is to talk about teaching your kids what I call the four big skills for life, which is moderate behavior, managed emotions, flexible thinking, and checking yourself. And so after something like that happens, you might say to the kids, you know, that wasn't really a good example of moderate behavior. You know, we really need to protect you and not talk in front of you about our divorce or separation or whatever. Or, you know, maybe the other parent was really angry. Say, now remember, we try to use our managed emotions, so let's us try to do that. So when you're talking with the kids afterwards, you're not bad mouthing the parent, but you're reinforcing these four big skills that you really can talk about the kids in an everyday way about friends, neighbors, strangers, Are they using flexible thinking, managed emotions, moderate behavior? So I think that's the way to do it without just directly saying dad was, bad yesterday.
That's great advice. Thank you. Some really good tips there. So that brings me to ask another question in light of the fact that older couples getting divorced and having older teenagers, young adults, or even, adult children who have their own children and there are grandchildren in the mix are divorcing. And it's become such a trend that it actually has the name gray divorce. So what advice, if any, do you have for those older teens and young adults or full-grown adults for managing the situation between the high conflict parent and the other parent after their parents are divorced or while the divorce is going on? Because they get affected too, right?
You're talking about the young adult coping with a high conflict co-parent, arguing with maybe a reasonable co-parent.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, it's tricky. I think young adults can start understanding about high conflict behavior. And I think that sometimes it can be helpful without too suggestive, just saying, dad gets angry, or mom, let's say it's mom. Mom gets angry sometimes, and you don't have to take that on. And that's kind of an issue that she has. So let mom own that, and you don't have to own that, and I don't have to own that. But slowly starting to say, especially answering questions, is if you ask me questions, I'll tell you what I think, but I don't want to involve you in our divorce. And we understand it's hard for you. Here's a good time for an ear statement: empathy, attention, respect. It's not Johnny anymore. Now it's John. John, I appreciate the way you feel. This isn't what our picture was of our family, but you don't have to protect me or take care of me. I'm doing okay. And if you want to understand what's going on, maybe there's a book you can read or an article somewhere. So I'll answer questions, but don't load them with a lot of information unless they're looking for it.
Okay. That's a very good segue to the next question in the series, and that is, what are some ways a person can improve their own skills so they can get better at dealing with high conflict individuals and reduce their own stress or feeling victimized in such situations?
Well, one of the things, of course, is to have a counselor you can talk through a lot of this with. Another is we developed a method called New Ways for Families that teaches the skills I'm talking about. And we have an online class for that, which is easy to access anywhere. We have a website, conflictplaybook.com, which is a place they can go and get this. This is a 12-session co-parenting class, which anybody can benefit from. It's not geared to gray divorce, but it's geared towards what the skills are to have a co-parent relationship, perhaps with another high conflict person. So if someone wants to improve their own skills and learn how to manage that relationship, that's one way they can do that. And online classes like $100 or something. So it's pretty inexpensive. Great.
And for people who like to read, if they had to select one of your titles to help them, manage the high conflict co-parenting situation, which one should they start with? And that's probably not a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
If they think they're headed right to court, I would tell them they should get the book. And that splitting really helps prepare you for going through a high conflict divorce process. If they're not going to court, or it's after the divorce, maintaining the ongoing co-parent relationship, I would say BIF for co-parent communication. That's really the one. And it's got 28 examples of, emails about doctor's appointments, about changing the schedule, about dance lessons, about sports equipment, just all this stuff. So BIF for co-parent communication is good. And I might mention in the appendix of that book, Appendix B, is an article explaining teaching those 4 big skills to the kids: flexible thinking, managed emotions, moderate behavior, and checking yourself in an everyday kind of way that builds their resilience and not absorbing the high conflict messages.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm sure that they appreciate knowing where to begin. Sometimes I have so many books on my desire to read list, I get stuck in paralysis on where to begin. So I thought that that might help a few people like me who have a reading list that's impossible to read in my entire lifetime. So Bill, what's up next for you? What can we look forward to that is on the horizon and that you're having the works?
Well, a couple things. One project is a video project on educating people more about parental alienation, which has been a controversial concept over the last few decades. But I think by now most professionals agree that there's parenting behaviors that can alienate a child against the other parent. And so thinking in terms of behavior is the way to go. And so this is to help educate people about what seems to be a growing problem in many divorces, especially I think also with COVID. One parent starts to kind of take over the child and the time with the child and the protection of the child, and starts really bad mouthing the other parent or pushing them out of the relationship. So I'm working on this. That's a video project. And then I have another book I'm working on. It's another year and a half away, about bullies and how bullies in families, in the workplace, in communities, in the world have similar patterns of behavior, and how people can recognize those patterns before they get in too deep with a bully. So it's about the powers and patterns of bullies. So that's going to be a very broad one, and talking about why that's happening at this point in the world. A lot of bullying seems to be increasing, and in many ways our culture is feeding this and giving bullying more attention than good behavior. And so I talk about that in there. So that's the next 2 big projects.
Well, they both sound fascinating, and I just wanted to say I appreciate the continued focus on alienating behaviors. I know rather unfortunate it was that there was a psychological theory that arose about probably 10 or 15 years ago now called parent alienation syndrome, and that was some sort of diagnosis syndrome that you could see based on behaviors and emotions exhibited by the affected child. And that sort of set the parent alienation thing in the wrong direction. And it seems like it's taken a while for that to regain legitimacy by saying it's not a mental health syndrome or diagnosable condition in the child. It's focusing on what are the behaviors that the alienating parent are using and watching for trends in that regard, much like you're saying, watching for the patterns with bullies. So it sounds like those are both going to be really, really useful resources for both individuals and professionals who work in the fields that we work in. So I'm looking very much forward to both of those projects.
It'll be a while, so don't expect anything too soon.
Okay. No rush, no pressure. All right. So I've just asked my behind-the-scenes supportive staff if there were any additional last-minute questions coming in from people, and I'm told that there are not. Just a lot of real great comments and engagement in the live feed. So I'm glad that people are finding this useful. Oh wait, there is a question. Here we go. Okay. Does the court recognize that there is bullying within the court system? And if so, why is there no repercussion for such behavior if it's so common? That's part 1. And then part 2 is also, I feel parental alienation is falsely via abusive parents, used falsely by the abusive parent as well. So can we take part one of that about bullying in the court system and why the court isn't reacting or responding to that?
Yeah, so it's really confusing these days because abusive behavior can take many different forms, and alienation is one form, domestic violence is another form, emotional other abuse. So, what we see in the court system is I think people latch on to one theory and they assume it's true, and so they're very aggressive. And this can be judges, lawyers, court personnel, very aggressive towards someone who actually isn't promoting abuse, but who may look like it, or they may have been told. And so I think it's a lack of education in the court system. And so some people, engage in legal abuse. They use the court system to give their co-parent a hard time who doesn't deserve it. And the court thinks they're setting limits on someone who does deserve it. So I think it's a real educational thing, but it's a confusing thing. And I want to add to that what I call the three theories of a high conflict case. And this is where judges, lawyers, mediators get confused. If person A, let's say parent A, says parent B is acting badly, some people go, oh, that must be what's happened. Other people go, oh, that's a false allegation. I'm sure it's not true. And some people say, oh, they're probably both equally at blame. Well, all three of those look the same on the surface. So judges, mediators, lawyers, therapists need to consider three possibilities and not jump to conclusions. And I think when you see bullying in court, like an angry judge or a staff person who may be negative, is they've absorbed the message that you're the bad person. And that may not at all be true. So I think it's a lack of education and to some degree what they call confirmation bias, which is just having one theory and jumping to that conclusion. So I think, in time it may be coming, but it's slow and it's sad and it's difficult. But that's where providing information, just straight information, may be most helpful in the court. And that's what I talk about in the splitting book. So I'd say the best way to deal with that is to do what's described in the splitting book.
Excellent. Thank you. And then the second part from that question was the person made the observation, and as opposed to a question, but maybe you could address it. I feel as though parental alienation, and that was in quotes, parental alienation, is used falsely by abusive parents as well.
Yes, and it can be. There's really four combinations possible here. So let's say you have a physically abusive parent and the child resists being around that parent, but that physically abusive parent says, well, the other parent's alienating the child. It's not me, it's the other parent. So that's a possibility. I've seen many cases where an abusive parent themselves is alienating the child against the victim of their abuse. So it could be either parent being abusive and alienating or opposite parents. Again, you have to consider these possibilities, these theories, but I recognize that does happen. And that's why people need to dig beneath the surface who are decision makers, but parents, people going through the decision-making process, need to provide really clear information about the patterns of behavior so that the decision makers have their eyes open to what's really happening. But I have a lot of empathy for people who are falsely accused of alienation, just as there's some people falsely accused of abuse or hiding money or falsely accused of making false allegations because things may be true. So the decision makers need to be more open-minded, and parents need to provide as much useful information and not just provide emotion, that the information is the key.
Excellent. Those are really, really challenging cases. And I think sometimes even when courts get forensic evaluators involved, it's challenging for the forensic evaluator to sort through what's real and what's not. But those are tough, and I appreciate your insight on that. So I'm mindful of our viewers' time and your time and coming here to join us, which is evening on the East Coast. I think it's still your end of your workday where you're located. But thank you, Bill, so much for coming and joining. I learned a lot tonight, and I hope that our audience walked away with some real value. I believe they must have if they stayed with us the whole time. So for people who want to dive in and learn more from Bill Eddy and all of your resources, where do they go to find you, your books, and your programs?
So you should come to highconflictinstitute.com for books, for videos, for consultation, for information about everything we do. As I said earlier, we also have conflictplaybook.com. That's where that parenting course is, and individual information for individuals. So between those two, you will find us, you'll find me, and we've got a lot of resources. We've really been doing this for 14 years now as High Conflict Institute. So sadly, our work needs to continue. But we do know a lot, have a lot, and can help a lot when people get informed and practice new skills and ways of communicating.
Thank you. And for those of you who are with us tonight, if you like this program, please let us know your thoughts. Leave us a review on our Facebook page here or anywhere else you find us on social media. Go find Bill Eddy and leave him a nice review too, because he volunteered his time to be here with us tonight and offer so much value. Also, like this page and like the Mediated Online Solutions website to keep in the loop about other programs. We try to do something like this, or a webinar, or something free to the community, or of value to our viewers and our potential clients all the time, usually once a month. So stay in the loop and you will find more good content here on social media. And much like Bill, our law firm webpage, whitsonlawfirm.com, and mediatedontlinesolutions.com has a ton of resources. There are informational videos, FAQ videos, blogs, downloadable guides to custody and getting ready for divorce and understanding mediation and all sorts of other things that can help you be armed with the right information you need at the right time, which is ideally before you have a case starting that you're going through. So, and be sure to hop on over to Amazon, check out Bill's books there. I know you can get them there as well. And check out Divorce Like a Pro, A Better Way to Break Up, where you'll learn all sorts of options about how to approach your divorce in a better, healthier way that's going to save you time and keep your sanity, hopefully. And remember, we're here for you. Whitson Law Firm practices only in New York State. Mediated Online Solutions can go anywhere you have an internet connection. And we're happy to consult with you on your unique situation and give you the appropriate advice and guidance if you want to reach out to us directly. We'd love to hear from you. Bill, thank you so much. Have a good evening. Viewers, thank you. And please give us feedback and suggestions for any other topics you guys would like to have us discuss or present on a future Facebook Live like this. And with that, ciao, everybody. Thanks again.